Howdy guys, Bookie Laura here. As you may know if you watched part 1 of my wrap-up, I'm now doing slight book reviews as my wrap-up rather than doing them separately. And this is part 2 as I read 11 books in January, which is a huge amount for me. So I'm going to set 1 minute this year to tell you about the book in as quick a way as I can, basically. And it worked okay in the first half, so fingers crossed it works okay in the second half too. So the first book which I read this year was called Girl Missing. I can't remember who it was written by, so I'll try and remember to include that, but I read it as an audiobook through my library. I picked it up based on just needing an audiobook and it wasn't too long. I didn't read too much into it. It was a YA book that basically tells the story of a girl who is adopted and is quite keen to find out about her birth family and her past, and then finds out that actually her past and her birth family is a lot more complicated than it sounds, and she goes through all sorts of trials and tribulations, as you do, including a kidnapping, by the way. I know. And anyway, what did I think of this book? I didn't enjoy it. I gave it 2 stars, which is my lowest rating out of all my January reads. I think mainly there are a couple of things I found really hard. Firstly, the narrator of the book sounded a lot like Dawn French, and as a comedian, reading a book in her voice just didn't fit. And secondly, everything she did felt so cliche and so ridiculous and unbelievable and unrealistic that it ruined the book. I found myself literally rolling my eyes every time she did things and just thinking no one in the world would ever have done that or said that in that situation. So it was so unrealistic, and that annoyed me. The second book, which I read this month, was The Explorer by Katherine Rundell, who is a great author, by the way. Look her up. I picked this up because I'd read The Wolf Wilder and absolutely adored it. So I've always been a big fan of reading kind of adventure rainforest stories, particularly when I was young. And I think this gave me that kind of nostalgic, loving feeling of just, oh, I love these kinds of books. Basically tells the story of a bunch of kids, I think there are 3, maybe 4, who crash in the jungle and are left to survive on their own and try and, get back to the big bad world. I really enjoyed it in terms of a nostalgia element. I gave it 4 stars, so it was a nostalgic read. Katherine Rundell is a beautiful author, and she has really sort of poetic imagery and description, which I loved. And it's a nice little adventure story too, so it's a really pretty adventure story. I wasn't overly enamoured with the ending, but it didn't ruin it for me. I think it was the journey I was interested in rather than the ending. Yes, indeed. After that, I read Maybe a Fox, which is by Kathi, Appelt and Alison McGhee, which I didn't know before I read that there. This basically tells the story of a girl or siblings, Sylvia and Jules, or Sylvie, and it follows Jules particularly through some really tragic circumstances. Their mum has already died, and then her older sister goes missing, and it is basically a really tragic story about death and grieving and how to cope. But it's told through sort of two narratives. You've got the girl and her tragic life and how she's coping with grieving and the deaths, and then also through a fox. And then Maybe a Fox comes from when she discussed with her sister what happens when you die. Maybe you become the wind. Maybe a fox. I enjoyed it. I gave it 4 stars. I found it was 100% a pretty book rather than an exciting book. But as a middle grade read dealing with death, I thought that was really enjoyable. That is not the right word when you've just said death, but anyway. After that, I read James Dawson's This Book is Gay. It's basically, I picked it up based on the cover because it's beautiful, and I thought, LGBT, let's read some more of that. But it's basically a weird kind of encyclopedia of gay. Like, it tells you how to be gay, which is quite strange. I like that it's really easy reading. Every section is short and is designed to be picked up and put down, and there's little cartoony drawings. But basically, I get the feeling from this book that it was designed for gay teenagers to read to feel a bit more normal and find out the answers to questions that no one tells you. I enjoyed it. I don't feel like I learned a great deal. I think nowadays, and myself, I know a lot about that anyway. It's not something that I've sort of hidden away from, but I can see it being really important for anyone dealing with confusing emotions or not knowing and what have you at that time and age. One criticism I have seen of this book is it's very homosexual man heavy rather than exploring all the different avenues in as much detail. So it depends what you're going for really, but I thought important book. How many times do I say books are important? It's because I really believe it. The next book which I listened to, again, was an audiobook, Tomorrow Belongs to Me, and I can't remember the author, so if I remember I'll put it in and all that. I really, really enjoyed this. It was my favourite audiobook which I've had so far this year, and usually I don't get along famously with audiobooks, so that was a really good thing. I gave it 4 stars, and it basically tells the story of this kid whose name I don't remember, because do I ever? But he runs away from home, and whilst he's there he meets up with this other character who I think is called Luke, and then they go, Luke offers him a lift, and they go off on adventures on this sort of running away from home lift, 2 teenagers together, until, mysteriously, lots of violent happenings take place. And I don't know why the main character couldn't figure out until really late what was going on, when it was so obvious. But anyway, I really enjoyed this. The narrator tells it in a really, really sort of strong Liverpudlian accent, which drove me mad at first, but I think helped to bring it to life. And then the final book which I read this month was A Boy Called Ocean by Chris Higgins. Definitely a cover read, because the cover is beautiful, but it basically tells the story of a boy and a girl, because it's YA, and yeah, they're friends, but obviously they're both romantically interested in each other, of course, and they're obviously, and then one day, there's a misunderstanding, and he decides to go off surfing into the ocean, and wouldn't you know it, it doesn't end well, and he has a lot of time with his thoughts.
Yeah.
It was okay. I gave it 3 stars. I found the characters' decisions just seemed very random. It just felt very cliche, like I wanted to know more about his experience in the ocean and all that, but it's actually more about, we love each other and we can't tell each other, and that's not something I'm that interested in reading. And also did that thing that I like, where it told the story from lots of different character perspectives. I enjoy books like that, I think, because it breaks it up, makes it feel shorter. Anyway, so those are the books which I've read this month. Those are the physical ones, and those are not the audiobooks. But anyway, if you've read any, then let me know. This was all of the books that I've read in January, or nearly all of them, were part of a really big haul that I got from the library, which I'm close to returning now, and I've read nearly all of them. I think I've got 3 left, and I'm not even sure if I'm going to read those. But anyway, look out for another library haul soon, because we're going on a trip very soon.
Yep.
Thanks for watching, guys, and I'll see you next time. Bye bye.